All righty, well, let's get started here. I want to thank you, everybody, for joining us and welcome to our conversation today. CMMC 2026, what DoD contractors need to know before their next renewal. So this session is going to be practical, conversational, and focused on what business leaders need to understand as the CMMC requirements continue moving into contracts and renewals. So it's not intended to be a kind of a deeply technical compliance seminar. It's really about operational readiness and making sure that folks know about the business risk, contract continuity, and understanding what the process looks like in the real world. My name is Rob Schenk, and I'm with Intelligent Technical Solutions. And here we specialize in helping small and medium-sized businesses thrive by managing and securing their tech. We help clients do their most important work without worrying about the underlying technology. A few housekeeping notes before we get started here. Conversation should run about 30 minutes or so. Conversation will be recorded, so you'll be able to review that at a later time and share that with colleagues and team members. We're happy to take questions during the seminar or during the webinar. Please want to make this as collaborative as possible. So in the Zoom toolbar, you'll notice a Q&A link. So please feel free to go ahead and pop in any questions that you have as we go. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end. We want to make sure that we get to everyone's questions. All righty, so as we get started here, you'll notice a QR code in the lower right. That's going to lead to a special offer page for attendees in case you need to leave a little early or something. Please feel free to scan that for later. But for today's discussion, I'd love to welcome our very special guests. Sean Harris, he's our Chief Risk and Compliance Officer here at ITS. He's been a business owner for over 15 years and plays a critical role in our cybersecurity strategy, incident response, and manages our security operations center here at ITS. He is a CISSP, among many other security designations. And I also want to welcome Ben Kurtz. Ben is president at Klosure, and we're leveraging his experience here today in sales, engineering, and purchasing to lead Klosure. He focuses on data-driven stewardship and fostering a culture of accountability, ensuring Klosure's long-term company success through innovation and a people-first leadership strategy and approach. So one of the reasons we welcomed Ben to this conversation is because we wanted attendees to hear directly from a business leader who is actively navigating this CMMC journey inside his own organization. So a lot of information and helpful tips and tricks to factor into your own journeys. So I want to welcome you both, and shall we get the conversation started?
That's good. Thank you.
All righty, so let's talk about what we're going to talk through. So our goal here today is to really simplify a pretty noisy market. There's a lot of confusion, there's some conflicting guidance, and perhaps some unrealistic expectations around where CMMC is right now. So we want to identify those things and really help arm business leaders and help them understand where organizations are commonly getting surprised and what practical readiness looks like and requires at this point. So Sean, let's talk about the big picture here. So what's changed over the last 12 to 18 months that has really made this more operationally real for many organizations?
Well, I mean, a final rule came out, right? So that's the biggest change over the last 18 months, where November 10th of last year, it became part of the mandatory to do the self-assessment for level 1 and level 2. And that makes the next date that's very real for those that have to get level 2 third-party assessed through a C3PAO of November 10th of this year, right? Very real. So what we're finding just in the marketplace in general, what's changed is that a lot of people that were kicking the tires or not quite sure if things were going to continue the way that they were are now rapidly trying to get this done now. So, or feeling like they're behind.
Yeah. So it's an important distinction. So would you say that it's kind of shifting from more of a kind of a technical discussion into an operational kind of financial discussion? Or it's kind of broadening out? How would you see that?
Yeah. I mean, I was just on call this morning where we're to the point where they're looking at several functions on how they meet this requirement. And it's, there's a formula there of how much income are you going to lose or gain against what the cost is. And the cost is probably more than you think if you haven't got into it out of the gate and you don't know, what it'll take. And so Yeah, so then it becomes very much an operational and overall organization discussion because, how do you get past that first hurdle to get that certification, but then how do you keep it? How do you continue to manage that over time? Because it's a different discipline than many more organizations have. And then some organizations are saying that they're coming to conclusions, this isn't for us, right? We're going to actually exit the market because we don't have enough. It just doesn't make sense. It's too much. And then others are all in. They go, we've been told by our primes or our contracting officers that it absolutely will be in quite a bit of what we're doing. And therefore we have to do it. It's a do or die situation.
Right, right. So Ben, from your perspective, as a business leader, like when did this become operationally real for your organization? How did that transition happen?
Well, so for us, I mean, we've been tracking this movement for quite a while. And when it really became real, one of the organizations we belong to invites a lot of the heavy hitters out of DC to do webinars and things like that. And there was a webinar that we attended with Sean will correct me if I get her name wrong, but Stacy uh Boss Janik. Is that right, Sean?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there you go. Nailed it, right? She talked about and she's in charge of the whole thing for CMMC for DoD, right? So she talked about the scheduling for this stuff and basically the immovability of it. Like it was not gonna change. Like they were adamant. They answered all kinds of questions about the directions they were going, and she had other folks from her department in there talking about the different things they were working on. But it became readily apparent that they were not moving the deadlines for this stuff. And and once that happened, that's when we knew, and this is probably 2 years ago, well, I participated in that. That's when we knew, okay, now we're on the runway for this really happening, you know? Um, and I think like you mentioned before, everybody was kind of waiting to see what happened, waiting to see if they were gonna kick the can like the government always does, right? That seems to be the thing that you hear about, they're not gonna do it today, they won't do it, they won't do it. On this stuff, they've been hitting their milestones pretty regular. And, yeah, so a couple of years ago, that became apparent, and that's when we, started reaching out and got in touch with Sean and started working with ITS to really kinda define what we needed to do and just kinda examine what we were already doing and kinda bring that into uh, a place where we can understand where we needed to go, right? What's left to do? How close are we? How far are we? That kinda thing.
Yeah. Sean, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard last name for sure to get. Kitty Arrington's the other one that's the head of that there. And when Kitty Arrington helped create it, and she left, and then when they brought her back as Pentagon DoD CISO, it was kind of a kind of a shots fired across the bow, right, for everybody to say, "Hey, this is not going away, even though administrations change and things may lax or loosen. This is not one that anybody's going to let slip." So we still have those bets on who, will it be fully enforced at the time of enforcement? I hear people saying all these things, but there's nobody taking any bets on will it not be something coming up here very quickly, right? Like, and so certainly, and in your case, Ben, if I remember, you had a managed service provider that was not us that you still work with that we know
Right.
like, yeah. And so we have
Yeah.
all different types of organizations that come to us. Sometimes it's directly, sometimes it's through our partners. And that's a smart MSP, right? That goes, hey, this isn't our wheelhouse. We don't have the specialties, but we want to get you the right special. That shows how much they care about their relationship with you. And that's how we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Alrighty. So let's talk through like the maturity process. Sean, making kind of talk through this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of people saying this, but one of the M's in CMMC is maturity. So essentially, maturity doesn't happen overnight. It's something that requires policies, procedures, right? You need a top-down approach to what it is that you're doing. You may have policies now. Many organizations we deal with, they don't. Are those policies, do they talk about CUI and FCI, right? Controlled and classified information, federal contract information, the important information that we care about for CMMC, right? Do they talk about that? Those policies, are you hitting the domain groups that you need to make sure to hit? Are you addressing all the controls, the 110 controls, the 320 objectives? That's to the level you need to do it. Then do you have actual process? That's the maturity of governance of making sure that they're reviewed every year. Now, do you have procedures to make sure that those policies are met? And then are you logging and watching in a way that you can prove that in fact you are meeting those things? And that's what goes into the assessment, is your ability to collect that evidence and prove that you're meeting those things. All of that can't be stood up overnight. All of it takes time, and it's a muscle group that has to happen within your organization to get it going. So it takes time.
So what was that for you like, Ben? Like this whole kind of maturity, kind of maturation
Yeah.
process. So maybe talk through that a little bit for you.
For us, we had partially started down this road, like Sean said, with our managed service provider that we work with here for our day-to-day IT stuff. And started going through those 110 um controls and saying, okay, here we're doing these, right? So you're looking down the list and you're going, yeah, we do that, we do that, we do that, and but what we're missing, what we were missing out of that, and what ITS brought to us was, the first thing we did was sit down and go through all of those and say, okay, how many of these are we really meeting? And the question then becomes, okay, yeah, you say you're doing that. Well, how are you doing that? And where's the evidence for it? Like Sean just mentioned, right? So it came back to a lot of answers on that. It's not no, we're not doing it. It's yes, we are doing it, but yes, partially. Like that's how we answer that question initially in the initial assessment. Yes, partially. Yeah, you're doing the thing and you've got a good practice involved there, but does it meet the level of expectation that the assessor's going to have? That's the question that's out there. Will it or won't it? So a lot of the answers we ran into as we piled through this was, hey, yeah, that's all great, but that one's not going to pass. You're going to have to use this other program or a different control method to meet the expectations of the assessor. And that's some of the stuff that just started to filter out really in this last year as the assessments have started to happen too.
Yeah. So let's kind of walk through the journey a little bit from an operational perspective. So Ben, maybe you can kind of talk through that. What's it really been like for you as you've gone through this process over the past, year and a half or so? Making share some insights for the folks attending.
Yeah. So again, because we had started where we did, we had kind of the luxury, I guess, of kind of ramping this up and having initially monthly meetings with Sean and his team to talk about what we were doing and kind of step by step through this. And as we're doing that internally here, we're having conversations about, okay, the costs involved and the things we're going to need to do internally, like our own internal projects that we're doing to be ready uh to meet the requirements that we have down the road here. Um, and the monetary part of that is a big piece. The passing that test as to, hey, is this worth it or not? Because it is an expense, right? Like every other business expense, it's something, but it's something that if you're going to do government work that like the work we do, we have to, because we have projects and we're a small company. We've got 30 employees and we're trying to keep everybody busy and everybody making a good living and that kind of thing. And we can't give up half of our business is with the federal government and for the DoD, right? So we can't give that up. So we have to do it for us. So that decision was pretty easy. Then it becomes the management part of, okay, um, how do we spread that out so that it's not just this big giant chunk all at once? And part of that is you're not going to get all this done all at once anyway. So it's going to spread itself out by default to a certain extent. Um, uh, but you do have to take the time to talk internally with your folks about the best way to skin the cat, right? Because there's a lot of different ways to do it. And it is pretty overwhelming when you look at the whole pile of things you've got to do. Even if you're partway there and you have a bunch of yes, partially answers, there's still a lot of work to do. And I always talk about eating the elephant one bite at a time, right? So you just have to kind of compartmentalize and segment that out, so it's in digestible pieces so that you can avoid getting overwhelmed. And before you know it, you're in a much better spot than you were to begin with, and it starts to look manageable.
Right. So Sean, it sounds like the kind of the operational kind of perspective is really important because I think sounds like maybe some organizations are potentially underestimating how broad this actually becomes. And maybe you can talk to that for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Some of the things that we go through in the journey here is, we start with, we want to understand the assets, the people, um, the devices, computers, all of that, right? We want to know the processes that are running. And then we're going to also do a responsibility matrix. Everybody, we call it a RACI chart. And we want to understand all of this in relation to CUI and FCI. So out of that, we then get a data flow diagram where we can do a process flow of how does this flow through your organization? What exactly does it touch all the way through? And many times that's a very eye-opening conversation because it does touch more than you think. And so once you're done with that, you can come to a conclusion. Well, what is the path that we're going to do? What's the environmental decision? And that's why some of these different solutions that are out there that say, CMMC in 20 days or 90 days or whatever it is, they're assuming you've already made that decision of that path of where you're going to go. And oftentimes it's one section of getting that path done. I'm, assuming that what they're saying is correct. And so essentially, it might be that they're going to have an enclave where you make a small greenfield environment in which you set it all up in there, and then you can control everything. Or it may be that that is untenable. That's not going to work. You got to do your whole organization. There's no way that you can isolate it there. Those are very different paths on the plan of action on how to achieve it. Once that's figured out, then you do the gap assessment against every control and objective. And then out of that, you have your first POAM, your plan of action, which is a detailed plan of here's all the gaps we have, and here's how we're going to fix them. And there's a lot of decisions in there. And some of the decisions are financial, right? Well, they're all pretty driven by financial, but some of them, like you were saying, Rob, it might be more operational. Hey, we're doing that, but should we be doing that? Can we just decide to do something differently and now de-scope that out of it? And there's a lot of those types of conversations being had. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Good points, man. So let's talk about the timing and reality of where kind of many businesses are finding themselves now. So we got some timeline pressure here. So Sean, like how should companies be looking at this? What's realistic at this point in time?
Oh man, Ben, when he was just talking a moment ago, he mentioned they had a little bit of luxury because they reached out a good, couple of years ago. They probably started on this, and so it's been some time for them. Right now, the timeline is tough. You're looking at, if November 10th is your deadline, which you need to check with your prime. If you're working with primes, they may be moving that deadline up because they don't want to wait till the last minute. I haven't heard a lot of that, but it's something worth figuring out before you get too far down this path. But if you're saying it's November 10th and, you need time for that C3PAO to be able to write the actual certification report after going through the whole assessment, many organizations want to do a mock assessment prior to the assessment. We highly recommend you do that. And so now you're about 90 days out from that November. So you may have a lot less time than you think. There's a lot of discussions right now where um, there's less ability to kind of say, hey, why don't we do this or that? Time is coming more into the conversation now of, hey, we could do it these 3 different ways, but what's the fastest way that's going to ensure we don't lose our contracts? So that's where we are now. It wasn't like that a year ago, but that's where we are now. And so there's no time like the present, and you really need to get started with someone. I would tell everybody on this call or anybody watching this recording, we hope it's with us you want to get started, but if it's not, please just start with somebody and get it going. And don't think you're going to pick one of these tools that's get it done in 20 days or whatever and just be able to be done with it. It is too big of a task. It's an elephant eating task, like Ben said. It's not one of those things you can sprint and get it done.
Yeah. Ben, any thoughts or words of wisdom here?
Yeah, I mean that what Sean said is for us, that's the thing. It's you got to get going. Right? If you don't start, you won't get there either, right? So even if you don't think it's tenable to even get to the November deadline, hey, if you're planning on doing these contracts, you still have to do this, right? So even if you end up with a gap at the end because the rule goes into effect and you don't have your certification yet, well, at least you started. You'll be ahead of the game. Because not everybody's going to make it. So, getting started is a big part of that. Uh, and really, even you need to have the conversation internally again to decide if it's something you want to pursue or not pursue at that point. So, but if you don't have the conversation, you'll never get there.
Yeah. So it's really kind of like an internal strategic leadership discussion about, what do we want to do, big picture, right? Alrighty. So let's talk through some key takeaways and talk bottom line here. What are some key takeaways that, you know, attendees, folks who are listening, can take back to their organizations, actionable next steps? Sean, maybe you can kind of start this off.
Well, yeah, I'd love to call back to what Ben said about the yes, partially answers.
Okay.
So there are some assessments that you can do where yes, partially is okay. Even some of the spurs through PIE, those people that have to do this will understand what I'm saying here. But there's a place where you put in a score, right? And that's required for certain types of jobs that you're taking and contracting officers. And so even some of those, you'll see spreadsheets that allow partial, and you might get partial scoring. In CMMC, if any of the objectives underneath the control is not met and fully met, that control is not met, and therefore you will fail. And so, and any major control has to be done. So it's a very high bar. There's many different types of organizations that can help you. There's registered practitioners. For CMMC, there's CCPs, certified CMMC professionals, and certified CMMC assessors. Those are usually on the assessing team. We have CCAs on our teams. I am a CCA myself. You have to go CCP, then CCA, without belaboring a bunch of acronyms. The point is, we've gone in and looked at exactly what is required, and we've done the same training as the assessors prior to going into any of these assessments with our clients. Because what's really missed there is that partially is not going to work. Like, it is just not going to work. And so you may have insurance attestations or other things that you've done in the past that you go, yeah, we kind of do that, or we do that, or if we had to, we could find that. That does not work for the assessment. You're going to have to pull that evidence and prove it before you even are allowed to go into the assessment. So they're going to push it if you don't have that. And that's where we see the biggest thing internally. We see two major things that I think is a key takeaway for anybody trying to figure this out, or you have an internal IT person doing it for you or anything like that, is that we either see the internal IT team severely underestimates what it's going to take, and their score is much higher than it actually is. It is just not at the level that it should be. Or we've seen the other side too, just to kind of give a ray of positivity, right? We have seen also where someone gets in there and gets way down the rabbit hole and way over provisions and overbuilds it, and they're missing the spirit of what the assessor actually requires. And they've thought of every possible thing. Well, you don't have to do that either. So if you're working with a good organization that understands it, that's critical. But just know, now is the time, if you have an IT person internally or an MSP or anybody working with you, to just go, if they've been saying all along, you're going to be fine, start testing the water. Go, hey, you know what? We're going to bring in either this expert, or, hey, we're going to do a mock assessment with this assessor, anything like that, right? And start to see how they feel about that, because it's going to start getting more real for them of now all this evidence is required now. And on that same note of the timeline thing, C3POs are getting very backed up right now. So if you haven't selected one and you know for sure that you need to do this, select now. You can put down a deposit, and you can at least make sure that you'll be able to get the test. That, you could do all this work and then get to the last part and there's just no open spots and you can't actually assess. So that's a very real problem too.
Yeah. No, important points. And then as far as kind of key takeaways, any other specific ones, items that you think is important to make sure that folks know about? And anything from your side?
Oh, I think the slide says it start now. I mean, that's the thing. If you got to get started, right? I can't stress that enough. If it's something you're going to do, you can't take on a project that is this large. Even for a small organization, it's going to be a big lift. So, then the only way to get it done is to get it started.
And I want to say, I've had plenty of people tell me, I cannot find what this assessment is if I look online, right? People have told me that. It is published by NIST. It's 800-171A. If you look it up, that's exactly how it's supposed to be assessed. And it goes through every piece of it. So if you're not sure and you just need to wrap your brain around it, pull that up. It's going to be overwhelming, right? but get into it and just answer the few very realistically. Like, am I meeting that or not? But ideally with somebody that has some clue about it, if you read the first few ones and you're not quite sure what it's asking. So.
Yeah. All right, good points. So for organizations listening today that haven't kind of validated their readiness, now's the time to start that conversation as we're hearing from Sean and Ben. So maybe Sean, so for folks that are interested in actionable next steps, like what do you recommend?
Well, I mean, you can email this email here. You can scan this QR code to go to our landing page. What this does is this sets up a discovery call, right? We're going to have a call with you. It's going to be with me, someone on my team, and we're essentially going to talk to you about scoping and figuring out where are you now and where do you need to be. The journey of this, I always am asked two major questions. What does it cost and how long is it going to take? Well, and it's really hard to give that until having a conversation, right? We need to know, you want to outfit your house to be a 3-story structure that can survive a military blast, right? Well, I don't know what you're starting with. Are you starting with an empty field or a tent or a Victorian home, right? We have to understand what do we have to rebuild there? And that'll tell us how long it's going to take and the cost, and we can talk to you about that. So I think that's the starting point. You got to get on a call with somebody and go through those initial questions so that you can get some concept of where you need to go.
Gotcha. Cool. So in the chat, you'll notice there's a link there that'll lead you straight to a calendar widget where you can go ahead and book a time. And also feel free to email secure@itsasap.com, and we're happy to get something scheduled for you. Um, any other final thoughts before we transition over to questions? Because we've had a few questions come in. Any other kind of final thoughts, guidance that you can provide?
I would
Okay.
say that there's some really neat tools that are coming out. Tools don't solve the problem, but there are things that you can use that will help accelerate this that have just come into the field in the last few months. Even some Microsoft licensing and offerings within their Gov Cloud. So talking to someone that knows about that can help your situation. So even if you think you're far along, or if you just want a second opinion, it's worth having someone come in like our team to just kind of go, hey, did you think of this? Did you add these things in? Or hey, you missed that. That's important. And we know because we bring in C3POs that we actually hired not for our clients, just to consult, and they come in and give us that insight, and we do that on a weekly basis. So
Sounds good. Alrighty, so a couple questions have come in, so I'm gonna kind of get that started. So let's transition over to the Q&A bit. Um, so in your guys' experience, what assumptions that you made turned out to be wrong? Interesting
I
question.
think for us, our initial assumption, I think, at the beginning of all of this was something we could take care of ourselves, and that we were a lot farther along with this, or a lot closer to being ready for an assessment than we were after we had took our initial look with ITS. Like, we're ISO certified, so we have some experience with the whole. Every year we have an audit. It's either a surveillance audit or a renewal audit, right? Every 3 years we get a renewal, so we have some practice going through this kind of stuff. So we understand comparing against the standard, and that's why we engaged a consultant to begin with, because hey, I'm not an IT guy. The guys that help me with this are not IT guys. We're all engineers, and we know how to build things, right? So, um, the when you find out you're far away from, you're as far away as you are from being done, man, the panic sets in a little bit, and you start looking at it going, God, are we going to get there or not? This is going to be a big lift and stuff. But that was probably the biggest thing that we assumed, was that, hey, I didn't think we'd have nearly as many things that were, um, yes, partially, right? Like, everything that was on that list was, yeah, you're doing this, but here's this other piece of it you need. I think in the end of our list, we had probably 7 or 8 things that we had a flat yes on, totally taken care of. Everything else needed a little bit of work, right? Um, so yeah, for us, that was probably the biggest assumption that we made rolling into this, that, we felt pretty confident with where we're at. And in retrospect now, looking back at it, we were in a pretty good spot. Don't get me wrong, but we weren't as close as I thought we were.
Yeah. No, good points. Sean, anything that any assumptions that you've found on your side?
Um, well, at first, I greenly assumed that if some other consultant had come in or the MSP had gone through it, that it would be pretty close, and those weren't. And then I started assuming, well, they're all going to be off, but some of them aren't. Like they can be overscoped. I can say what I see from orgs that commonly have assumptions that we're talking about is that this is all just like a policy thing. That, you know what, with AI and with templates, we'll just spit out those policies, we'll be good, and we'll pass. And it's not a policy thing. The policy is the beginning driver of all of it. And there's just a lot of work beyond the policies that need to be done. And so I would warn anybody that's making that assumption to know that that is just the outer shell of all the work that needs to be done.
One thing I would interject to here at the end of this is that the long and short of it with CMMC for us is that it's not just about getting the assessment done. I mean, the journey that we've taken to this point, um, I've watched company after company, even locally here in the town we're in, get compromised, right, through ransomwares or malwares or any number of horrible things that can happen to your business. And I know that the journey we've been on has saved us from having those kind of problems. It has made a difference. The training that we do with our people, and that's part of what comes back to this all-encompassing thing that you end up doing. The training that you do for your people, getting them on board as a group, that's part of what you have to do to make this stuff move along, right? So everybody knows what direction you're going. Um, that all makes a difference, and it really put us in a better posture overall. I'm not saying we won't ever get compromised because I can't, there's no guarantees with any of this stuff these days. Um, but I sleep a whole lot better at night knowing we're doing the things that we're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's not money that we've wasted. It's money that has actually had an impact and has made us better.
Yeah,
I-
that's great to hear. Good.
I love that you bring it back to that because it can be, especially now with this crunch time, right, coming up,
Yeah.
you can lose sight of this. And I think the industry as a whole is going to take a collective exhale after we get through this requirement, right? And then the whole industry's security has gone up, right? And our nation's secrets are better protected. So
Yeah. All right, another question came in about what internal conversations became necessary? What sort of time commitments are we talking about? And then how much time is this going to be taking up of my internal teams?
For us, internal conversations that started happening, obviously, for myself and the partners that I have were centered around some of the financial expenditures that we're making, what the long term looks like. And that's something that IT has helped us out with too, with the worksheet that kind of showed, hey, it's not here's what you're spending right now, and here's what the next 3 years looks like. So it's not just what you have to do today, but it's what are all the things you're adding that you need to maintain throughout, right? That answer is going to be a little different for everybody depending on what their network situation is or how they're solving the problem of handling this information. But that's definitely one. And then also internal conversations that start from the top down about commitment to cybersecurity and doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. Those things have to happen. If you want this to be successful, you can't just rubber stamp all of these things and have documents in folders. People have to be doing the things. So those conversations have to happen. As far as timelines for us, currently we're spending probably 30 to 40 hours a month on this, and we're in a position now where we're getting ready to ramp up a little more for that. We started out early on with the one meeting a month, and as we've gotten closer, we've ramped up the cadence of that. And as we get closer, it'll be more, so we're ready for that. We realize that that's part of my plan for our summer, right? Is we're going to be spending some more time to get this finished up. So, and everybody knows that that's where we're headed.
Yep.
So you do have to budget. You do have to budget your time and your resources for this.
Yeah, no, great points. Another question. In your experience, what has caused the biggest delays? What should we be looking out for?
Well, so one thing that we try to root out fairly early with that scoping, right, exercise that I talked about earlier, where we're looking at what such as CUI or FCI, what we're specifically looking for is, are those storing the data? And if so, are they FedRAMP moderate or better, which is a specific, means they met certain requirements that is required of CMMC. If not, is there a way to pull it local and take that out of the, or move to another party? One of those that's very common that people may overlook is using commercial Microsoft. They might be using Microsoft 365 and they actually need GCC or GCC High, which is the Gov cloud, Gov community cloud. And so that in itself can take time, and it requires a lot of effort to move from one tenant to another, deciding how many people you want to move, if you're going to do an enclave or not. We have several organizations now that through this process, they're realizing that their whole organization needs to be at least CMMC level 1, and they might have an enclave where they meet level 2 for that more sensitive information. And so they're doing like a GCC high combo between the two. But it's really, that's something that if you wait until the end to do that, it's going to require a lot, and you're probably going to have to push out all your stuff, all your assessment dates.
Yeah. Ben, what did you see? Any internal delays that you saw? Any ones that you might point out?
Yeah, I mean, the things that hang up, like Sean talked about, the Microsoft transition, which we did make, um, that comes with some back and forth. Sometimes there's some delay in the licensing and stuff because you have to validate that you're a federal contractor and that you're registered in sam.gov and all of the administrative stuff that you have to do. So it's not just, hey, let's go buy the software and install it on our computers. It doesn't work that way. So yeah, it's been that. Again, for us, we started early enough that we haven't seen anything that was, if we had delays, it was kind of baked into the system a little bit for us. But I haven't seen anything that really hits us up too bad. But I would caution that, hey, your implementation of software could definitely be a thing. And just making sure that those programs and cloud hosted things that you're using and things like that that's the kind of stuff you really got to look at. Because there's a lot of different utilities we use. And once you start going through this process, if you haven't started this yet, one of the things is you look at all of the softwares that's installed on your network, right? And that really opens your eyes to all of the stuff that your guys might be putting on their computers that you didn't know was going on there. And you have to pull all of that back in and say, okay, what is this and what is it for? You know,
Right.
that process takes a minute, you know, that that can get you into trouble pretty quick, I think.
Yeah. Alrighty. Another question. If my customers are not ready for the CMMC requirements, should I assume that we will be losing contracts regardless if we are meeting the requirements or not?
Customers are not ready for the CMMC requirements. So is this, so your customers are your primes and contracting officers in this, I'm guessing?
Let's see if you want to add any other nuance to that. The person who submitted that one. That's in this one live.
There is a caveat, right? Where in the final rule, it does say that starting November 10th, it will begin to roll out into the contract. So there are some possibilities that your contract may not require it immediately for the level 2 assessment. So that's some of the area where there's flex in there. It's really interesting for me because I don't work directly with Department of Defense. I'm just working with all of these contractors, right? And so depending upon what industry they're in or how many suppliers in the market, it's very different, it seems, on how that prime or that contracting officer will treat them in relation to this. So if you got a lot of people in your market, it seems to be very cut and dry. You better have this done or else you're out, And then I've seen other ones where there's this one company. I've got a couple more. It's like a couple people at this very specialized company, and they do something very specialized for the Department of War. And apparently they're kind of working with them to make sure that they get there and there's less of that, cut or dry, what's going to happen there. So I think that's trying to address the idea that many people have brought forward is the actual supply chain is going to dwindle because there just won't be enough people that get through this. And so that's going to be in itself, a crisis. Right. And so I would just say that, you're best to, some of the things we talk about in our original discovery meeting, right? If you set up a consult, is you really need to understand where these requirements are coming from. And you need to know that. You need to ask your contracting officers or your primes. And I know some people that are afraid to ask because nobody's telling them, and they're afraid once they ask, then, oh, now magically it's going to, oh yeah, you're right, you need to have this done yesterday, but you really do need to ask, and you need to, your contracts right now probably have DFARS. They have things flowing down as it is now. You may just have to look closer at them. And then those are very, very critical things to understand when you're internally having those discussions about, is it worth the amount of money that we're going to have to invest? Because you need to be able to put, here's the exact amount of money at stake if we don't meet this. And you can't do that if it's a wishy-washy. So I don't know if that answers the question of what you're asking, but it seems, because we're all a bunch of human beings, it's one in which, your assessors are going to be a little different. Your contracting officers are going to be a little different, and eventually they'll all get them in line. They did bring us back to, recently as an assessor, they had us do a Delta test where you had to test again to kind of realign you to make sure everybody's on the same page now that these final rules have come out. And that was an attempt to get everybody, because people were straying and all had different opinions on how this should be going.
Right. Awesome. Well, thanks for that one. One other question. What advice would you give another executive starting out on this process? Anything else that would help them accelerate and or get ready for the upcoming, deadlines and so forth?
Right. If it was me starting today on this process, I think the most important thing you can do is to make sure that you have the team that you have around you involved with it, so that you can gain as much information as in that includes your IT. Wow, whether that's an IT guy you have, whether that's an MSP that you have, to kind of get a baseline of where you sit right now, and then start to kind of figure out, okay, how far up the hill are we going, to get there? And, what's the money, those kinds of things. But start that discussion again, the earlier, the better, but make sure everybody's involved.
Yep. Sean, any final thoughts?
So I'm a project manager at heart, and this is just a really big project, right? That's what this is, that you manage over time, which is what compliance is. And part of making sure a project will be successful is making sure that all the stakeholders are aligned. And so I think right out of the gate, you got to make sure that whoever is your point of contact that's doing it, the IT person or whoever it is, the people on your team, in your leadership team, they need to all be aligned on this. So whatever that takes, if that's a rough orders of magnitude cost over 3 years, like what Ben was talking about, that we helped them build out, whatever that is, so that you can all get on board and say, we're on this now. Because however you feel about it, you're either in or you're out on it. And if you're in, just be full in and realize that it's going to greatly uplift your security, and it's going to be a positive thing. It's just going to be a bit of a, you're going from wherever you are to this higher stake of security, and it's going to take some work.
Yeah. Awesome. All righty. We'll give it a couple of 15 seconds here. In case if there's any other questions that come in, be happy to answer that. While we kind of wait for that, I just want to again, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Ben, for sharing your expertise and your experiences. Hopefully this has been very helpful for the folks in attendance. And again, please feel free to reach out. There's the link in the chat there to go ahead and set up a complimentary assessment conversation with us, or you can email us at secure@itsasap.com. Thanks so much. Appreciate everybody's time. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll catch up next time. And thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Ben.
Take care.
Thanks.
Awesome. Bye now.